Today we are learning basketball with Ez. You can find him at just Ez Baraheni. He's on the NBA Daily with The Athletic, video host at Raptors Republic, and Bleacher Report NBA. In the arena with Raptors 905, on the sideline with CEBL League. I mean, this guy's everywhere. You find him with ProHoopsWriters. I mean, come on. I feel like I'm leaving stuff off too. I mean, you got
you got it all, man. It's all good.
The sportscasting group. I mean, come on. He doesn't stop working, this guy.
Yes, sir.
So how you doing today, Ez?
Man, I'm good. Appreciate you bringing me on. Good to talk always when it comes to all things basketball related with you, RK. Yeah, been fun, man. Been fun season. I actually really enjoyed the season, even despite the crazy dialogue about how this season has not been fun and basketball is broken and all that type of stuff. It's been a good basketball season, in my opinion. You know?
Hey, man, I mean, I'm loving the hoops, and there's definitely, it's a big conversation. A lot of people have a lot of thoughts on where the game's at, and
I know, yeah.
It's funny when someone says like the game has been solved, and it's like maybe at the peak of the NBA team level where like there's like incredible 5-out basketball and versatility and shot making. Like I see the ascension there, and I could also see like the desire to want to see maybe a more variety of play styles between players and teams.
Yeah.
But like you can watch different levels as well. Like if you really are a basketball fan and you want to see maybe a team struggle a little more or have to work for their shots, there's college and high school too if you want to mix it up. Like you don't have to watch the perfect
That's funny.
League every time.
It's true.
But, the NBA is a lot of fun. The talent's never been better, and I mean it's just great getting to cover this league and a sport we love. And we're here today to talk about Defensive Player of the Year race and the 2021 NBA Redraft. And we're gonna start off with I'm gonna call it DPOY. I don't know if everyone else does, but the race for DPOY.
Definitely DPOY. Yeah.
All right, you already know. So Wemby has fallen out of the race. We wish him the best of luck for a quick injury recovery.
Yeah,
it really stinks to see him go down, especially after that D-Fox trade with CP3, like still healthy. About he's talking about bad injury luck as the playoffs get near. He just can't catch a break with his teams. But it stinks to see him go down. But what that does mean for us NBA, are we talking heads? I don't know. We're on our way.
We got some talking heads. We're yappers. We're yappers. Yeah, I would agree so. Yeah.
So for us yappers over here, we gotta figure out who's the best defender left. And there's a ton of great names. You can basically just close your eyes and point at the Oklahoma City Thunder direction, and you probably will pick a good. Probably come out of there with a good answer. But we're going to try to really define who is the best defender in the NBA this year. And we're going to rank our top 5. Maybe we go back and forth a little bit. I'll let you start with who you have ranked 5th. And maybe after all of it, we can, give a shout out to anyone we didn't quite get to.
Yeah, so coming in at 5th for me is a guy, and I think at a team who hasn't gotten a ton of love for their defense this season in the LA Clippers. Ivica Zubac is the guy that I have in 5th. Zoo is obviously having like an incredible year offensively, playing next to James Harden, the rim running ability, the ability to like pick and roll, get vertical, finish over people, all that type of stuff. Even the post moves this year have been a little bit more refined. So he's having a good offensive season. It's a career high for him on that end. But I really do think the defense is where he's locking in. And again, they're either the second or third, last time I checked, third best defense or second best defense in the league. A lot of that is because of Zoo. And if you look, dunks and threes, we talk about eligibility. Defense is one of those things where you consider like, all right, Chet Holmgren no longer in the race, right? Chris Dunn, I believe he's no longer eligible because of the 20-minute per game rule. Alex Caruso also no longer eligible. Basically, the top 7 guys other than Zubac are not eligible. And so he's the only guy in the top 7 in defensive EPM who is eligible for this award. So that deserves a little bit of love. I think where his case eventually falls short is he doesn't have the raw stocks. He doesn't have the steals or blocks to be able to compete with some of these other guys. Like he's still averaging over a block per game, nearly a steal per game. But his steal and block percentages are just a little bit lower than everybody else. He deters at the basket very well, though. Like if you look at his defensive field goal percentage, it's up there with some of the best in the league. But overall, I think that's where his case falls short. It's the raw box score numbers, you know.
Yeah, that's a great shout. He was on kind of my first out list, but you hit on some of the numbers that I was noticing as well. I mean, like you said, like top. But real quick, this new rule is just wild to me. I guess it's not that new, but like the idea that like I don't know, half of the eligible candidates for all these awards are just not eligible because of a random like decided number. Like I think that's a factor that's very easy to consider for voters, like without the rule. Like
you should be able to contextualize that. If you're voting for an NBA award, you should have the like wherewithal to be able to like contextualize. Okay, some guy who played 60 games versus a guy who played 66 and was less impactful defensively. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Yeah, it's crazy. I agree with you. I totally agree with you on that.
Yeah, and honestly, it's taken some of the debate out of a lot of these discussions because that was a big factor in the voting was, you know, like you said, say some guy was clearly the best player for 50 games, but someone else was maybe 80% of that player for 70 or 80 games.
Yeah.
That was a big factor. And I think a lot of people would just default to the guy that played more games anyway.
Yeah.
So it's kind of stinks for some of these guys that have clearly been, you know, you can take any of them, but like take Franz Wagner down in Orlando, like clearly an all-star level player, was making an all NBA type of case. And he's just not eligible because he won't hit quite enough games. And I just don't see the incentive being promising enough to be worth just not letting anyone get those votes. So
then, you know, to your point, it also muddies the waters contractually for some of these guys because if you're ineligible, there's going to be a random guy here or there who did not deserve to be on an all-NBA team that ends up on an all-NBA team. And then that might happen a couple seasons in a row, and bam, you have a guy who's eligible for much more money than he probably should be eligible for. I'm not trying to pocket watch here. Like, this is something that is CBA constructed. Like, they've made it so that it's a lot easier for these guys to get paid, which is awesome. But it's also, from the eligibility perspective, from the second apron perspective, these teams are less willing to spend now. So it's like this weird paradox of like teams who aren't willing to spend, and also you've made it more enticing for players to play as much as possible and get as much money as possible. So it's this weird paradox of like, how is that going to go down in 10 years from now when, I don't know, name a guy, Julius Randle is like a 4-time All-NBA member when maybe he shouldn't have been a 4-time All-NBA member, you know?
Right. And the same can be true about kind of the opposite of that, where like a guy like Paulo misses out on that All-NBA extension that seriously, you know, there's a lot of money. Those are millions of dollars at stake that he's just no longer eligible for his best case extension because he missed a certain amount of games. And obviously, you know, he's been dealing with an injury since he came back as well that seems to have affected him a little bit. So would he have made the team? Probably not. But after the first 5 games this year, it definitely seemed possible when he dropped like a 50-point game and all that. So it just kind of, like we said, like it's more than just, you know, us deciding who's worth, you know, quote unquote money. It's team building. You have X amount of money, you have a salary floor, you have a salary cap, and there's millions of dollars being affected by these rules. So it's just a little much to actually, you know, it just doesn't seem like it's achieving the goal of the rule.
It's not doing what it intended to do. Absolutely. Yeah,
exactly. So, you know, on that, there are only so many players eligible for the Defensive Player of the Year award. You know, basically maybe 3 Oklahoma City Thunder guys could all kind of be on the list between Jalen Williams, Shai, and Lu Dort. And you know, there's a Rudy Gobert, there's a Bam Adebayo who are lurking as well that are still eligible. You mentioned Zubac, and you know, I would say with my number 5th pick to jump right onto my side, I'm going with Lu Dort on the Thunder. That is the Thunder player I've decided. I don't know. I'm partially going to weigh previous seasons under the idea of this guy has been their lockdown defender at point of attack, guarding the other team's best guard or small forward for years. And now that they have, I mean, you could literally take those three off the table, and they still have an all defensive level talented team there left over between Caruso and Chet and Ihart. But some of those guys
100%.
also have missed about 20 or 40 games respectively. So, do we punish the roster for being great defensively by just not rewarding anyone and say that no individual deserves it? I mean, I think a lot of voters will probably end up rewarding Shai because he's the MVP candidate, because he's the face of the franchise, and the Thunder have the number one defense in the NBA at the moment, and the Clippers are at third as of today, to your point earlier. And I just got to go with Lu Dort, the 3-point dart when he's hitting. He's the Dort dart.
The Dort
but,
dart.
He's a lockdown point of attack guy.
Yeah.
I wanted to give him some love because, we all know how great Shai and Jalen are, but, Dort's got to get a little love here too.
Yeah, it's sort of weird because you look at some of the OKC guys like individually, and I again, like, on-off numbers are not the greatest, especially when you have the craziest amount of talent. But like the Thunder actually are better on defense when Lu is off the floor. Just weirdly, like, I can't even explain that in any sort of way. Same thing with Jalen Williams. Like, they're actually better, 5 points per 100 possessions better with Jalen Williams off the floor. But it's just because Alex Caruso, incredible defender, not eligible. Isaiah Hartenstein, not eligible. Chet Holmgren, not eligible. So, like, they have so much defensive talent that I think the on-off numbers are kind of muddy when you're talking about OKC. It doesn't tell you the whole story. You just kind of have to watch them. And this is why the Thunder, and in general, trying to parse through defense, like Defensive Player of the Year awards, is kind of difficult for most voters because it's not just the numbers that you can look at. Sure, you can pull up defensive EPM, you can look up deflections, you can look up on-off numbers and impact, but I just don't think there's a world in which, like, you can just look at the numbers to talk about the Defensive Player of the Year. And to that point, I think Lu Dort has a really good case. I think for my fourth pick, if we're going to push this along, I actually would have Jalen Williams. And the reason I'd have J-Dub is because when Chet was out, and there was a portion of the season when Isaiah Hartenstein was also out, he was basically their de facto center. Like, he was the tallest guy on the team. He was in those, like, super small ball lineups. He was the anchor of that team defensively in the back line. And I think that's really important to what the Thunder were trying to do because of how chaotic they are at the point of attack, causing turnovers, wreaking havoc with their ball pressure. That's an aspect that I think is underrated. And what J-Dub did to sort of anchor that in that stretch, plus how well he's been playing defensively all season, I think it puts him in the conversation for the Defensive Player of the Year. Again, I think the reason his season kind of falls short is because how do you look, and this kind of applies to Lu Dort as well, but wing impact defensively compared to a big guy, a 7-footer, a traditional rim protector, like who I'm imagining we're going to talk about in a few minutes. But generally, it's harder to reward guards and wings compared to some of these bigger guys who have much more clear impact on the defensive end and are generally much more impactful defensively to, like, giving you a top 10 defense generally. That's why Zubac has a really good case, because he has anchored the hell out of a top 5 defense in the NBA. So I think it's hard to give it to a wing player. And it's funny because J-Dub had that quote, I think like a month ago, saying they should have 2 Defensive Player of the Year awards, one for the wing, one for an anchor. Okay. And I don't actually hate the idea. To be honest, I don't hate the idea. But that's why it's hard to parse through, like, giving one of these wings or guards DPOY versus giving it to a big.
Yeah, that's a great point. And it goes to show, like you just said, that, that's why a player like Zubac needs a shout out at this point, because, James Harden's the one that got the all-star nod on that team. And yet they're winning probably because of their top 3 defense more than anything. And that starts with him down low and his ability to anchor that defense. And you're right that, like, normally there aren't many guards or wings anchoring a defense on a night-to-night basis, even if they are, guarding the other team's best player, because they aren't necessarily the ones responsible for, like, the last line of defense, that help defense, that rim protection, that a lot of the responsibilities fall on the bigs. But
Yeah.
there are cases where that might be the case. Like those Bulls teams a few years ago come to mind with like Lonzo and Caruso, where the guards kind of held it down. Even this Magic team with, Goga Batadze is down low, but you got Jalen Suggs at point of attack, and many would consider him kind of the face of that defense, or Marcus Smart all those years ago with Boston. So, it happens, or even Drew Holiday has made a career out of it. But, who, by the way, how does he not have a DPOY? Like, can we just, talk to Gobert, work something out here? Like, just transfer, just trade something. I don't know. Like he's got to come out of this decade with at least one of those trophies. But he does have two of those championship titles,
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And look, to your point, I think there's a really clear-cut case for one player as an example of this. Dyson Daniels, I don't think either of us could dispute that he is going to be a first-team all-defense member this season, one of the best defenders in the league this season. But
you found my number 4 pick.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's the next guy right there.
I was actually going to say I think that's why it's harder to put him on here, but tell me your reason. Because like the Hawks aren't the best defensive team this season, but he's been incredible on the defensive end.
You're right. And yeah, that is something that on this point is hard to parse between like a great team defense and a great individual defender. Yep. Where do wins come into the equation for defensive player of the year as much as, MVP or all D or all NBA, whatever award you're voting for. And it's probably slightly different criteria for each one. But Dyson's just been ridiculous. Like, just to drop, let's see here. His deflection stats, the one that jumps out. He's leading the NBA with 6 deflections per game. The next closest is 4.5 with Herb Jones. It's just insane. Yeah. And then you throw the steals on there.
He has
he's at 3 steals.
Yeah, he has 100 more deflections than if you go by total deflections, he has. Let me double check this actually. I believe he has 100 more deflections than the second best player in deflections this season.
And 60 more steals. He has 60 more steals. And just to put that in perspective, Wembanyama has about 60, 70, 80 more blocks than the next closest.
Right.
Dyson Daniels is racking up that ratio of turnovers from the backcourt.
That's absurd.
And just to throw a fun stat he just did the other day from the NBA history account, he's just the 5th player since 2000 to 2001 to have 11 or more games with 5+ steals in a single season, joining Chris Paul, who did it twice, Allen Iverson, Larry Hughes, and Monte Ellis. And
shout out to Larry Hughes.
Hey,
Hell
gotta shout out Larry Hughes. A legend. Monte too.
Yeah, Monte too. Yeah, that one's actually the most surprising name. Monte getting 5+ steals.
Yeah, you might not not just once, but 11 or more games with 5+ steals in one season. So. Monte was out there forcing the turnovers. But yeah, Dyson he's just such a pesky point of attack defender. I was watching him against Cade the other day. There was one play that stood out where he went in for a reach. Might have been a little bit of a foul, but they didn't call it. Then Trey went in for a reach and just missed on the swipe. And then Dyson just swiped again. Dig, perfectly timed, swipe the ball out and breaks away. And he's done a nice job, at least that play, and sometimes this season, of being able to go downhill off the turnover and look for shooters, look to create a little bit of a 4-point, 5-point swing off of those deflections and force turnovers as well. So I just think it's been kind of a match made in heaven of what they wanted. The Atlanta team wanted, DeJounte to kind of be next to Trey, just this point of attack stopper who ideally can hit the catch and shoot 3. We'll see if he gets there, but just somebody that can, guard the other team's best guard and play connector role next to Trey and keep the ball moving and make heads-up plays. And I think Dyson's just burst through the expectations that they've had this year with him.
100%. Dyson is a good call. I think like generally what his case kind of fell short for me to make it in the top 5 was the Hawks not being the greatest defense. And so it's like, how do you reward that in the set? And that's why it's really hard to I agree with you. Dyson is clearly one of the best defenders in the league this season. And if you watch him on a night-to-night basis, you're like, this guy is one of the most impactful one-on-one defenders in the league.
Right.
How do you not put him in your top 5? That is crazy. Maybe you've kind of sold me on the idea of putting him in here.
There we go.
Booting Zubac.
To your point, Atlanta is 14th on defense. That's right at average. While you got the Thunder number 1, the Clippers number 3, the Rockets number 4.
Yeah.
Boston 5, Minnesota 6, Orlando's in there at 2, and which missing their guys, maybe there's someone there I should be shouting out too with the Magic, But
yeah, hey,
but yeah, I mean, it's kind of like the counterpoint to the Thunder argument is like, how do we like acknowledge who are the best defenders on a team full of defenders who are doing it all together and have the top defense to show for it, compared to one individual defender on a team of average or worse defenders who's kind of doing it on his own, but still racking up a lot of numbers. And at the end of the day, defense comes down to forcing stops. And this guy gets his hands on as many deflections as anyone, if not twice as many. And he forces more steals, about 60 more on the season than anyone. And forcing those turnovers, to me, deserves a nod this season as, like, at the very least, I think that should probably earn him an all-defensive team award,
sure.
if not
Absolutely.
the DPOY. And there might be slightly different criteria for that. But at the moment, I got him clocking in at 4.
So I think Daniel's case is pretty similar to, if you look at last year's case for Alex Caruso, because Caruso was an insanely impactful defender. Some of the same arguments that you can make in terms of deflections and steals and all that stuff. Obviously, Daniels is doing it at a more historic level. But the Bulls were 22nd defensively last year, and yet Caruso was very clearly one of the best defenders in the league. He ended up with an all-defense second team award. But it's that sort of argument, right? And how do voters parse through that, like kind of sift through what makes sense individually versus team? I think generally most voters, if we're just doing it like based on what we think will happen, voters struggle to go through, all right, this guy is clearly one of the best defenders in the league, but not on a team that's winning defensively. How do we acknowledge that? I think that's where Daniel's case probably ends up falling short. But in terms of individual impact, man, he's incredible.
Yeah,
clearly
and maybe
deserves to be up here. Yeah,
and maybe that is a big difference between like the individual main awards of MVP and DPOY, the best player in the league and best defender in the league, where winning really matters.
Yeah.
Versus the All NBA and All Defensive teams that might be slightly more individual based voting criteria for a lot of guys. Because
totally,
I agree, a lot of people will just kind of look at the top 10 defenses and say who's the best defender, just like they will with MVP. Maybe see the top 3 teams in each conference, say who's the best player. Well, those guys all automatically get like consideration for the award just by default. And that's what makes it, pretty hard. So who do you have at 3?
Okay, at 3, this is where it gets a little bit more interesting. You can make a case for a lot of these players. So this is where it gets a little bit trickier for me. It's like, how do you reward another Thunder player? Like, how do you work through another Thunder player getting in here? How about Shai Gilgeous-Alexander? How do we feel about SGA being 3rd in Defensive Player of the Year vote? Because I think there's a case for him when you look at deflections. He's near the top of the league in that. Obviously not Dyson Daniels level, but he's been absurd defensively in his own right. And I think there is something to be said about carrying the offensive load that he does while still being incredible on the defensive end at the point of attack, causing deflections, being a guy who's like going to just hound guys at the point of attack as an aggressor, ball pressure wise. So why not SGA as your guy? If we're really leaning into, let's just give it to one of these Thunder guys, how about SGA? Although I will admit, when I was doing my counting, I started at 4, so I had 4 guys instead of 5, and now I'm just like slotting in SGA here. I probably would shift it and have SGA 5, go Zoo at 4, then go, Jalen Williams, and then finish off with the 2 guys that I think that are in the best case for this. But yeah, let's do it that way actually. So I've given you 5 at SGA, 4 Zubac, and 3 was Jalen Williams. How do you feel?
There it is. I mean, you really can't go wrong with these Thunder players. And yeah. I mean, literally, if the all defensive team came back and it was just the Thunder starting lineup, like, I don't even know if that many people would disagree. But yeah, Shai's a great choice. I was struggling with as well, like which Thunder player to pick. And, he's obviously been absolutely incredible on both ends of the floor. Like he's clearly in MVP contention. I would say he's the front runner, but Jokic is lurking and having an all-time season. Giannis is still Giannis, but I think between last year's kind of coming out party for that team and now kind of get a little more recognition. You add these other defenders and really have a high profile roster. Like he deserves credit, and there's no problem at all, rewarding him over the other guys. I myself, I ended up with Lu Dort, like I said, just kind of like being that defensive anchor guard. But like we've been talking about, all of these guys are elite defenders. All of them deserve a nod and consideration.
So who's number 3 for you?
Sorry. So I went with Amen Thompson,
I
who's
love it.
flying around out there. I would say this is another case of kind of the individual and over the team. But that being said, the Rockets are 4th in defense right now, and I would say Amen Thompson and Tari Eason are the main reason why, in my opinion. Amen is currently
that's a good shout.
Amen is currently 9th in the defensive EPM stat that we've been looking at. Zubac, you said, was 6, and then Jalen Williams is 7 on that. So those are the only players. And then Shai's lurking about, he's in the 97th percentile. Mobley is in the 97th. Dyson Daniels is 96, and Suggs 96.
Yeah.
Jaren Jackson 96. So all these guys are about top 20 in defensive EPM at the very least. And Amen's right there. Individually, he blows me away. Like, he might be the best athlete in the league or one of them as, a really young player. His ability to just fly around and make chase down blocks and just explode to force turnovers is incredible to me. And I just thought he deserved a shout in this exercise, where you could definitely make just as strong of a case for Shai because of the winning that team is doing and the defense that team has. But someone is responsible for the Rockets defense being top 4. I want to say last year too, and I think Amen to me is the face of that defense, and he's had kind of a big leap as well, where I feel like he's gotten more opportunity as the season has gone on to enter the starting lineup and be given more role and increase his usage and see a little of what he can do as like a point forward type of guy that can get downhill. I just, can't say enough nice fun things about Amen Thompson. He's way too much fun to watch out there.
He's one of my favorite players to watch in the league. I think like the Rockets probably, similar to the Thunder, fall under the whole thing of like there's some really, really good defensive players individually on there. You think of Dylan Brooks, you think of Tari Eason, you think of even Fred VanVleet when he's active, like very, very good defenders at the point of attack. And so, like, where does Thompson's case fall in there, and how do people vote when it comes to looking at the Rockets? I would agree with you that if there's one guy on that team that should get rewarded defensively, it is Amen Thompson. And he probably ends up in the top 5. I think eventually he will be when votes come out, he will be a top 5 defensive player of the year vote getter. To your point of being involved in everything, his athleticism allows him to be in spots where he might not be able to get the steal or block and somehow find a way to still be impactful defensively. Like, there's moments where his back is completely turned to a guy that's about to take a layup, and next flash frame, he's got the block. So it's really incredible to watch him do stuff like that on a night-to-night basis. And again, to your point, like the Rockets are winning. The Rockets are one of the best defenses of the league. They will get rewarded like that. So I agree with you here on Amen. I think he definitely deserves a shout and probably is in the conversation here. I feel weird now adding 2 OKC players in my thing, but maybe I shouldn't. I don't think I should, because they have like the greatest defense of all time, arguably, and it's hard to not reward some of these guys for the way that this team is winning defensively. And I feel like people are immediately with OKC going to say, well, Chet would have won it if he was eligible. Their defense didn't fall off when Chet got injured. They're obviously better defensively with him, but they were still humming along, perhaps even like dominating with him off the floor and sideline. And so, like, I just don't think there's that argument there where it's like, oh, well, Chet would have won. They're not eligible for anybody anymore. I think with the way that they are historically dominating on the defensive end, they're 5 points per 100 possessions better. Well, last time I checked, I don't know if it's exactly that anymore. It should be maybe 4 or 5. They're 5 points per 100 possessions better than basically any other team defensively. Let me double check it out. Now it's 3.3. The Magic have caught up. Anyways, that's like near the top of the league in terms of differential season to season. Like I went through and looked at every defensive rating from now until I believe it was like 1984 is Basketball Reference's latest, and there were only one or two teams that had that big of a point differential defensively. So they're doing it at an insane level, like an incredibly high level. And that deserves recognition in some way, shape, or form. Defensive Player of the Year. DPOY.
Yeah.
DPOY.
DPOY, there it is. Yeah, I mean, no doubt. This team, I would have been someone that would have thought that Chet would be the anchor of the defense if he was eligible for the award, but they, like you said, are just as good without him, and obviously better with him, like any of these defenders. But that's a credit to Sam Presti, who, had the foresight to bring in an Isaiah Hartenstein, where not only can you play them together when they're both available, but you actually have a defensive anchor who's top 5 in impact potentially, no matter with either one on the floor. Almost like the idea that you would stagger a point guard or stagger your stars, like they can stagger their defensive anchors, where it's just very hard to score on them. And yeah, I mean, we can't praise the Thunder enough here. Like there's nothing wrong with rewarding them. I do think this is my top 5. I do think like it'll be the two guys we're about to talk about, and then I think Shai will probably end up getting those votes from the voters when it's all said and done of all the Thunder guys. Right. I think to be in that top 5, and from there probably Dyson because of the deflections and all that stats, but maybe Amen too. That's kind of where my head's at. But like you could easily see, I mean, the voters love them some Go Bears, so don't be surprised if he ends up somewhere near that list. Yeah. And shout out Bam Adebayo too, holding it down for Miami still too. They just were on the first out of this cutting board list. So, I believe we're down to our top 2. And to me, this is the defensive player of the year race now that Wembanyama is out. It is Jaren Jackson Jr. versus Evan Mobley. It is 2 rising unicorns that are actually living up to that unicorn potential even more, in my opinion, than Kristaps ever did. Yeah. Like these guys are showing it not just as defensive anchors, but you got Jaren breaking out as an all-star level scorer, versatile downhill post up, can shoot, can attack, can dribble, and then Mobley really ascending as a playmaker this year to me as well, where he's just grabbing and going, bringing the ball up. Like the Cavs are most dangerous to me when Mobley's bringing the ball downhill, trying to look to score, and then he's just surrounded by shooters now, and it's like it become almost like a point forward thing to them, and that's more offensively. But these are 2 defensive anchors. I honestly don't think there's a wrong choice here, so I'll let you start. Who do you have as your defensive player of the year here?
My defensive player of the year right now, and again, you said like it's really close. These 2, I think maybe even by the time we finish this conversation, the voting can kind of change for this. But I think my defensive player of the year is Jaren Jackson Jr. There's a couple of reasons for that. I think first of all, if you look at like defensive field goal percentage, Jaren's numbers are a little bit better on that front. He defends about 5 basket attempts, basically 5 shots at the rim every single game, although there's probably more to that than kind of meets the eye. And he allows less at the basket. I think his defensive field goal percentage, let me pull this up quickly so I can just talk about it accurately here. So defensive field goal percentage, which is obviously how well a player defends at the basket. Jaren Jackson Jr., 5 attempts at the basket he defends per game, and it's 54%, whereas Evan Mobley is about 6 attempts per game, and it's 58%. I think generally, from what I've seen, Jaren's ability to, and this is sort of something that I've battled with when it comes to talking about these 2 players, and the reason I have Jaren over Mobley is like Mobley also has Jared Allen next to him, which is another guy who honestly could be put into this conversation for Defensive Player of the Year in terms of an anchor. His sheer size, his ability, his awareness as a guy who can defend the basket is incredible. And so those 2 anchoring Cleveland kind of makes it so that Mobley's case, like he's not that he's reliant on Evan Mobley. In fact, if you look at like the numbers, the Cavs are better defensively with just Mobley than they are with Allen and Mobley together. But overall, I do think there is something to the fact that Mobley plays with a guy like Jared Allen, who is a great rim protector, a guy who can rebound, a great defensive rebounder, and a guy who can block shots in his own right. Whereas Jaren, outside of Zach Edey, who is good and is figuring things out, is still a rookie, gets into tons of foul trouble, like is not nearly as impactful as Jared Allen. Jaren kind of has to work both roles. He's excellent at guarding the pick and roll, splitting the difference between the roller and the ball handler. He's excellent as being a weak side rim protector, so he can be next to an Edey or a Brandon Clark or Santi Aldama or whoever. And so he kind of has to play multiple roles for this team defensively, whereas I think Mobley does. He's absolutely versatile, but I think he has that security blanket a little bit more than Jaren in Memphis. Jaren has to, like, the Grizzlies sort of require more of Jaren defensively than the Cavs do on the defensive end. So that's where I come across. It's like, I think Jaren is the defensive player of the year. That being said, like, you can make a very good case for Evan Mobley, and I would not be mad at all. You know, is that what you're going to do? Are you going to make the case for Evan Mobley?
I'm very tempted just for the sake of the podcast and conversation. Honestly, when you go up and down the stats, they're not identical, but man, are they close. Like, yeah. I mean, yeah. They are just like neck and neck, whether it's like the team defense is at they're 7th and 8th. And, right. You know, the deflections favor Jaren. Like, I think all the stats slightly favor Jaren, but they're all very close. Like, I'm not, maybe there's one that sticks out that favors Mobley, but like the defensive field goal percentage you hit on already, the defensive EPM on dunks and threes slightly favors Jaren, unless I got that. Oh no,
actually, it slightly favors Mobley. There you go. That's the one.
We got it. I mean, they're basically they're off by 0.1, but you know they're basically tied in all of them. But we found one in here. But Jaren, you know, racks up a little bit more deflections, is a little bit higher on the shot blocking and the steals as well. And you hit on a lot of the main points here that it feels like Jaren Jackson Jr. is the fully blossomed version of himself. Like, while Evan Mobley is on his way there, and it feels like we could get even more out of Evan Mobley going forward. But he's on an ascension already, and he's obviously in this discussion even where he's at now. Yeah, whereas absolutely. Jaren, you know, Jaren popped off. I think it was either last year or the year before when John Morant missed a lot of games due to injury. They relied on Jaren to also be their offensive primary scoring option, and that's where he really, you know, showed, hey, he can be a 28 points per game, efficient shooter scorer kind of guy as well. And so he showed he can do that. And then now Ja's back, and can kind of focus on what he does best. And like, take the other night, it was just an epic matchup of I got to see Grizzlies Magic in person, and basically Franz was drawing Jaren on the switch over and over again. And the first 2 times Franz went to attack him, Jaren got him. Jaren got him good. He blocked him at the rim twice in a row, which led to, I'm pretty sure that was what led to a technical foul for Jamal Mosley, kind of fighting for his guys, saying like, right. you got to call that as a foul. And it's worth noting the next time that matchup happened, right before halftime, Franz attacked Jaren, drew the foul at the rim. And from that point on, Jaren was in a little bit of foul trouble, and Franz was able to kind of take advantage and get to his spots and finish at the rim and hit some pull-ups. Yeah. And, you know, Grizzlies still pulled out the win, but it was just kind of a really cool back and forth to just see that matchup of, you know, great players. And we'll see how Mobley and Franz kind of look. They play tonight. We're recording this on Tuesday, February 25th. So, you know, we'll see how that matchup looks tonight. But, you know, at the end of the day, I would vote Jaren as of today because most of the stats slightly favor him. And also, kind of like you were saying as well, like he is the bona fide clear defensive anchor. Even, you know, with a shout out to Zach Edey, who's been an impressive rookie. He's not quite Jared Allen yet, who's almost a borderline all-star and has been for years.
And
So,
also could be an all defense member this season. I really do think, and this is kind of, it's bleeding into the points for all of these players that we're making, especially with OKC. It's like when you have other great defenders, it's gonna sort of cannibalize your case for this award. As much as that sucks, it's part of the process of like how people approach this vote situation. Me and you, right, with OKC, we just went through, I said J-Dub, you said Lu Dort, and it's like this. That's probably going to happen for most voters too, right?
Yeah.
And so when
you
you're
split
looking
votes,
you split votes, and when you look at the Cavs, it's probably going to end up being the case too, where some people are going to be like, man, no, I actually think Jared Allen is also another defender to put up here. So hard to parse through. Can I go through some points per possession defensive numbers for these guys,
please?
Which I think lends to what you're saying. So Jaren Jackson Jr. defending the pick and roll, 0.82 points per 100 possessions. Evan Mobley defending the pick and roll, 0.92 points per 100 possessions. Isolations, Evan Mobley, 0.83. Isolations for Jaren Jackson Jr., 0.7. And it's pretty similar possession numbers and whatnot. But generally, Jaren's numbers are slightly better in terms of efficiency guarding those two actions. So I think to your point, some of the numbers just lend towards Jaren being the better defender this season. But again, you can make a good case for Mobley too. This is really, really close case.
Yeah, and just for the listeners, with the defensive stats, you want to be a little lower. It's like playing golf. You want to the lower score is better when it comes to defensive stats. So that's where that comes in. And yeah, on your point, Jaren is the defensive anchor and the help guy and the switch guy. Like he doesn't have necessarily a luxury of a Jared Allen behind him, even as Edie continues to impress. Mm-hmm. He's not quite there. And that, I think, is ultimately what separates him for this award, not to mention the fact he has won the award before. Yeah. So he now has that credibility in voters' minds for being voted again. And he's shown that he can be a defensive anchor of a top 10 defense who's like, it's less about how skilled versatility is that a word? Skilled that both of these guys can be, and more about what they're doing. We'll count it as a word. We'll count it here. Yeah. So like obviously, like you could say hypothetically, if you switched Mobley and Jaren, what would the results be? And they might be very similar. Like maybe Mobley would jump out and be a little more of do everything because he has to, while maybe Jaren could focus on more help side things if he's not the only anchor down there. So, but at the end of the day, Jaren's the one doing it for this team right now. And that's where we end up. So Jaren Jackson Jr., 2025 Defensive Player of the Year. Yeah, that's the official pick of the Learning Basketball Pod.
Man, it's crazy because like it really should be Wemby or Chet. Like it's just such a wild situation. Anyways, it doesn't matter. Yeah, it is what it is.
It's crazy how it works out like that because I definitely agree. Like Chet could have been the favorite if he had played enough games. I mean, he's missed 40 games I think at this point. Yeah, so like there was a minute there where he probably was second those first 20 games or so, and he definitely would have been the face of that defense in voters' minds as the rim protecting anchor, despite having three other candidates that we have mentioned worthy of this discussion. So that is there is something of rewarding the anchor over all the others, but that's where it comes down to. So we end up splitting some votes. I want to say we both had obviously Jaren Jackson and Evan Mobley on our top five, but that might have been the only two we both had in our top five. So that could kind of show how voters might, 3 through 5 could kind of come in a few different directions. But I feel like pretty confident saying Jaren and Mobley will be the top two for this award. But, that being said, Shai probably is the likeliest to get thrown in there just because of how great overall he's been and how great that team has been.
For sure. Yeah.
By this time. So, with that being said, I thought this was a great time to kind of transition into a NBA redraft of the 2021 NBA draft.
Cool.
And why not talk about the one and only Evan Mobley once again? I thought it was a natural pairing to talk about here because Mobley has burst onto the scene. We've talked about his defense and his grab and go ability. I think we are watching his breakout year right now, where he has really, like, the narrative has shifted a few times where take their rookie years with Mobley and Scottie Barnes in the rookie of the year race, where that was a real back and forth, could have gone either way, but Scottie really popped out and impressed. And if you did a redraft after year one, I wouldn't be surprised if he would have been the first pick at that point. And
Yeah.
then, maybe a year later, where you look at the Rockets with Alperen Sengun and how he's popped out. And you probably couldn't have redraft talks without someone saying, "Oh, Sengun's the clear number one." Like, there's no one else you would even consider. And then another year or two go by, and now he might not be in the top 1, 2, or 3 picks. So it's just interesting how quickly things change. I think ultimately you got to wait basically for the whole career to actually play out to really know for sure.
Yeah.
But at least you got to wait. I mean, we're now what,
4 years.
4 years.
In. Yeah, 4 years in for these guys.
4 years into their career, and that's generally I like to give prospects about a 5-year window to really develop into what they can be. Maybe it's a different situation. Maybe it's developing within their role, but that's ultimately, especially as they're getting drafted at about 18 or 19 years old now, to let them get through their rookie contract, enter their early prime athletic years, and kind of carve out their role. So, I think we're getting closer to that point with this class. So why not dive right in? And we didn't really talk before. I can start off with the first pick if you'd like.
I feel like both of us are gonna have the same first pick, but I will let you have the first pick because I feel like we're gonna be on the same page here with what it is. But go for it. Yeah.
Yeah, it could go either way, but I mean, surprise, surprise. I'm gonna go with Evan Mobley in the number one pick.
The same. Yeah, yeah, we both have the same. Yeah.
There it is. So obviously we've hit on him a little bit, and you can make a case honestly for 4 or maybe even 5 guys this high, but it's one of those things we were talking earlier where I don't think there's a wrong choice, but I do kind of think Mobley's the right choice, if that makes sense. Yeah. Like there are a handful of guys that most teams would be happy with as their franchise player, as their all-star, that they would like come away happy if they left the draft with one of these 4 or 5 guys at the top and could really build out a defense or an offense around those guys. So, in that sense, that's how impressive this draft is. And honestly, when you're looking at all the talent, you could go all the way down through the first round and find rotation players that are contributing to an 100%. NBA team right now. So this is one of the deepest, most talented drafts we've had in a long time, maybe since the Luka Jaren and Trey draft back in the day. So, we mostly hit on Evan's ascension, but I think he's a franchise player. He's the unicorn we've all been waiting for. We talked a little bit about it, but that ability to just grab and go off a rebound has really popped this year to me, where he's taking it with confidence and force and just attacking the rim, showing off his fluid handle, able to pull up for mid-range shots and attack the rim, but really that playmaking to be able to just constantly set another handoff or drive and kick and just relocate and keep that going over and over, where he really has become an offensive hub while being a defensive player of the year candidate, which is really insane to think about. So that kind of guy that can make tough shots, can grab and go, can defend anybody, that's the guy that I would want to start a franchise with out of this group.
Tangibly, like the 2 things that I think have really improved for him this season, based on like just Kenny Atkinson putting him in the right spots. You mentioned the grab and go stuff and him pushing in transition more often, him being the pick and roll ball handler in situations. The Cavs becoming such a great cutting team this year has enabled his playmaking in such a massive way. But I think the 2 things that have really helped him blossom, 1, it's his ball handling, and 2, it's just the aggression level. Like, he's so much more aggressive getting to the basket. He's so much more willing to use his size and physicality than he was prior to like even last year. It felt like the one thing that was missing from Mobley for the first 3 years of his career was just like willing to embrace contact and fight through it. Because like strength is obviously such a massive thing with guys of that position. And he looks so much stronger this year getting to the basket and being aggressive. And I think ball handling is an aspect of that, because if you are being asked to bring it in transition, grab and go stuff, if you are being asked to be this dribble handoff guy, pick and roll ball handler in certain situations, like you need to develop as a ball handler. And so I think those two things have really helped him blossom on both sides of the ball. So I agree with you. Evan Mobley, also one of my favorite players. Like, before this draft even happened, I was like, I really wanted the Raptors to draft Evan Mobley. I thought he was going to be the best player in this draft. And like 4 years from now, we both kind of agree on that. Number 2 for me is Cade. I think it's hard to not put Cade here in this present time because of how awesome he's been. Again,
Unreal.
this is one of those guys where, like, if we were to do this after their first year or even after their second year, he probably doesn't have a conversation for being first, but he genuinely has a conversation for being first in this draft. And I think it'd be amiss to not take him second just because of the growth that he's had. I think contextually, he had like one of the worst contexts through the first 3 seasons of his career of any player in this draft class. And the way that he's really popped off as a shooter, much more comfortable pulling up into threes this season. The decision-making has been better, although he definitely needs to clean up the turnovers a little bit. I think that's an aspect that he's growing at over the next couple of seasons, like refining his ability to take care of the ball. But overall, like, his scoring is great. The way he sets up his teammates is awesome. And obviously the Pistons have turned into a really, really fun team because of it. So Cade is the guy. Cade's number 2 for me for sure.
Yeah, I think that's essentially the clear pick. If you had asked me a few months ago, I might have made a case for somebody else. Franz, and honestly, like, I mean, if we're going off potential, I'm still like, I have Scottie lurking.
I have a thing I wanted to bring up about Scottie after we drafted.
Let's do it.
Well, we'll talk about it. Who's your third guy?
We'll dive in. Just on Cade real quick.
Yeah,
his. You hit on it. I mean, like, I was trying to pull up some of his numbers, but he's putting up 26, 6, and 10 assists per game this year. Like, he looks like, when you read his box score, it reads like a peak Westbrook type of box score nowadays.
That's true. Yeah.
And it's almost like the big difference this year, which maybe it's more than this, but seems to just be surrounding Cade and Ivy when he was healthy with some shooting and some veterans that can score a little bit, between Malik Beasley, who's having one of the best 3-point shooting seasons since Steph, quite literally, and a Tobias Harris or Tim Hardaway was there for a second. They just picked up Schroeder at the deadline as well. But, Cade's been unreal. Like, I think of all these players, he's the most complete offensive engine of anyone available. And that 3-point shooting you hit on is partially why. I mean, the game against the Hawks the other day was just insane. They were, Trae Young and Cade were going at it, just both putting up huge numbers, some wild shot making shots. I want to say, let's see, Cade ended up 7 of 10 3-point shooting from 3 with 12 assists and 38 points, 3 blocks and a steal. Like, he's just doing it all, like a true point forward who can just run the offense, smart decision maker, maniacal worker, can hit the pull up 3 now and get to the rim and make good decisions. Borderline one-man offense potential is where Cade really could end up. And, if he's not already there. So I think that's the right pick. And yeah, you predicted me right. Franz Wagner is coming up next. Number 3. We got Franz. We got to give him a shout. Yeah. Already a Magic legend. We're 4 years in. Doesn't take long, but you made it. I mean, Franz, the leap this year has been incredible. We got flashes of it last year, especially in the Cavs series with his kind of development as a pick and roll ball handler that was on full display in the Cavs series. And this year, Paulo goes out 5 games in. It takes a couple games to kind of find the Magic to find their rhythm, but then they put the ball in Franz's hands and just let him loose and run whatever it was, 20, 30 pick and rolls a game through Franz, let him be the fulcrum of the offense. And he showed during that next 20-game stretch that he's an all-star level player very clearly. I think if he didn't have that injury, he would have been a lock for the team itself.
100%. Yeah.
And arguably all NBA if we want to set our sights even higher. But at the very least, he might not be a guy that just self-creates fadeaway mid-range jumpers all the time. But that being said, I should say he doesn't necessarily do that without a screen. But if you set him up with a pick and roll or a double drag or a horn set where he's able to use a screen to create a little bit of an advantage, maybe keep somebody on his hip with a little hostage dribble. Like, he gets to his spots. He can hit the Dirk one-legged fadeaway. He can attack the rack with very rare type of angles and finishes, like almost like he's falling away from the rim and then spins it back in. And he's doing all this at like 6'10 or 6'11.
Yeah.
And so between that offensive option, and I didn't even mention, he's arguably the Magic's best defender too. Like, he's one of the best defensive wings in the NBA. Whether you look at I want to say he was one of the only players, I don't have it exactly in front of me, but he was one of the only players that was about plus 1.5 EPM on both sides of the ball. There was only about 5 or 6 players that had that, and it was all of these defensive player of the year candidates. Basically, it was Wembanyama, it was Chet, it was Jaren, it was Shai, and it was Franz. Mm-hmm. And so that just kind of goes to show a little bit of how much high impact Franz brings on both ends of the floor. I think his game is super scalable as well, and he's shown that he can kind of fit in where he needs to and make winning plays. And really the last frontier for him beyond just consistency is the 3-point shot. And he's hit more of the pull-up threes with the step backs this year. He had just a bad year last year, but I think that was more of an anomaly when you look at his kind of averages over the last few years, that he's hovering around 35% on his career, if I'm not mistaken. And he might just be a guy that's more comfortable pulling up than catch and shoot, like we've seen before with a James Harden or with a handful of different types of players that seem to fall into that kind of line of thinking. But he's currently 33% career, still not quite up there, but he's taking more than ever this year. He's taking 6 threes a game, and it's only 31% basically. But his first 2 years were 35, 36%. Last year was down to 28, and now it's still only 30. But I don't have the pull-up. I know the pull-up numbers got a little bit better this year, but I don't have them in front of me. And the Magic are literally having one of the worst 3-point shooting seasons any team has ever had. Like, it's kind of hard to fathom. I kind of can go on a whole rant on that, but I imagine most of it is just the injuries to the main guys, making life a little harder for everybody else who might be more suited for a catch and shoot off ball role, where they might be asking other guys that would rather be off the ball to do a little too much on the ball. But that being said, Franz is the guy. He's the pick here. Number 3. Was that your number 3 as well?
So I just wanted to get the numbers for you. So pull-up shooting, Franz is at 32% this season, and then catch and shoot, he's at 29%.
There you go.
3.5 attempts on catch and shoots, and then 32% on 3 attempts from pull-up. So yeah, I mean, I think that's the like next step for Franz. It's just improving as a 3-point shooter. If you're going to have the ball in your hands that often and be a pick and roll facilitator, just makes it harder on the defense, puts more pressure on defenses when you're able to shoot that shot as well. I think that's an evolution that came with Jason Tatum. You know, you think of a guy who frequently had the ball in his hands, but was a pretty inconsistent and streaky shooter throughout the start of his career, but then really turned it up and became a really excellent shooter, and has improved to become a pretty good pull-up shooter as well. So maybe that's the world. That's the kind of path you can see moving forward. And also just the way both those guys use their physicality on drives to create opportunities for themselves at the basket, I think is really special. So I agree. Yeah, I think Franz is there. And 4 for me is Scottie Barnes. So this is where I wanted to talk about Scottie a little bit, because I think generally he's had a down year compared to the rest of these 3. And these 3 have really popped off this season. So it's comparatively looking at their seasons, clearly Scottie isn't having the season that Mobley is or Cade is or Franz is. But I think it's because his career sort of went in reverse of some of these guys. For instance, right, Cade spent the first 3 years of his career in not the best context, in very high usage situations where he's being asked to do a lot, but on a team that probably wasn't good enough to really heighten his ability on that end. And then in terms of generally what Franz has been able to do is be a part of a very, very good nucleus early in his career. Now, obviously, the Magic had to build that up, and Franz is a huge part of that equation. But you have a Suggs, you have a Paolo Banchero next to you, guys who can help alleviate some of that pressure offensively. Mobley obviously had Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland, and I would argue probably has like the best context for his game of all of these players. And so we've never really seen Mobley in a adverse basketball situation as we've seen Scottie. And I think the first 3 years of Scottie's career, he wasn't in an adverse situation. He was playing off of Pascal Siakam. Pascal was helping him get to, good efficiency on his shots, working off ball more. But this year is the year where the Raptors are fully committed to having Scottie be more of an on-ball presence, and you can see it from a usage perspective. I was looking at this earlier before we were about to pod, but Scottie's usage this season is 27%. It's the highest of his career at any point. If you look at like Cade's numbers, Cade's at like 32% this year, which is ridiculously high. But generally, Cade has been 25% and higher his entire career. Mobley has never cracked 24% in terms of usage rate. And Franz, I believe this year ended up being like 26-27% usage rate. This was his first year above 25% usage rate. I believe last year he was like 24.2 or something. So in terms of usage, this is the year where Scottie is being allowed to do a lot. And I think that's probably asking too much of him and what his level is as an offensive hub. Does that mean that like he's not comparable to some of these guys? I don't think so. I think he can be. It's just the context around him is not really doing him any favors right now. And the Raptors are doing tons of experimenting with like how to put him in situations to thrive. I think this is why I'm a little bit higher on the Ingram acquisition now compared to when it initially happened. Scottie really needs a secondary scoring option to alleviate some of the pressure offensively and to get him off ball more, to be used as a screener, to be used as a guy in the dunker that can roam in and around the basket and kind of feast on opportunities that way, and to really help him thrive on the defensive side of the ball. I think Scottie can play all defense level defense. I think, given his wingspan and his ability on the weak side, he can eventually put himself in Defense Player of the Year conversations. Like that's how great of a defender I think Scottie can be. And so it's just about getting him in the right role and putting him in the right context and situation that makes him comparable to some of these guys. Whereas right now, it just seems like this is year one of him being the number one guy, right? Being the number one dude on the team. He had a little bit towards the end of last season, but it was cut short because of his ankle injury. So I really, actually, no, it was an ankle injury. It was a hand injury. But I think that's the case I would make for Scottie still being in the conversation with some of these guys, is that he's not been put in the greatest context this season. And he's battled through some injuries, and it's put it in a way where like he's kind of soured on some people from a draft perspective, like looking back on it. But I really do think he still has potential. I think he's still like a guy who will be able to make all NBA teams and will be able to impact winning in a massive way. It's just that those guys now have great context, really, really great context, and you're seeing their games blossom. Once Scottie has that context too, I believe he'll blossom as well.
Yeah, that's a great point on Scottie Barnes, and I'm totally with you. Like I'm not selling my Scottie Barnes stock by any means, and you make a lot of good points there. Where take his defense, where I believe his coach Darko has been praising his defense, in these post game conferences and the matchups he's going up against. He's affecting a Kevin Durant the other day, like making the game harder for stars like that. And we've talked about his potential before. I don't think his story is fully written. Like I think he can very well end up as impactful as everyone we've already taken so far. Like I would still like choose Mobley first and Cade second, like we've been doing. But I don't think Scottie's totally out of that conversation quite yet. And like you said, the team context has a lot to do with it. When we're talking about Evan Mobley and his context earlier and playing with Darius and Donovan Mitchell, it obviously not a direct comp, but a little similarity to how well a Draymond Green would fit next to a Stephen Clay, where he's able to kind of complement each other and make each other's games better and kind of unlocking a sum of its parts effect by by that chemistry and that, just the talent that both of them bring on both ends of the floor. And like, say you threw Scottie Barnes in that role, even where he's got Jared Allen behind him and scores shooters like a D Mitch and Darius Garland to work with off handoffs. Maybe it looks a lot cleaner. Maybe he's in the DPOY race for all we know as well. And that's not to discredit Mobley as much as just say Scottie's a capable defender already. To me, he's borderline all defensive already, and is a true point forward who can a downhill force who draws fouls and has really nice vision is what stands out to me for Scottie to this day. And even back in the draft, I was really high on him in the draft, and I probably should have been higher on him. I ended up with him at like 5th during the actual draft, just because of all the kind of the hype around some of the other Jalen's in the draft that we might hit on later. But I was like criticized even for that, and I was just like, this guy's like 6'9", 6'10", everywhere defensively, a downhill force. He looks like Giannis light. Like, he's the closest player I've seen to Giannis since Giannis. And does that mean he's going to be that? No, of course not. But like, if he shares some similarities and skills, there's an avenue to an elite role down the line. And we mentioned even last time we talked how like this year would be a little more experimentation. Maybe they would get more post-ups for Scottie and kind of build him out of as a post-up hub, so he has more of kind of he can unlock his vision in the half court without having to be full speed downhill all the time to show that off. So I think there's a lot of versatility that he brings. Heck of a defender, 3 through 5 kind of front court switchability, and maybe even, can throw him on guards as well. And just a natural point forward.
I think, like, to your point about putting him in certain situations, I think that's also one thing that has hurt his efficiency this season. It's because, they've gone through stretches where they're like, in December it was, hey, Scottie, take 10 threes a game. And in January it was, okay, we're going to put you in the post. And, they ran more pick and rolls for him earlier in the season. And so it's just kind of this oscillating thing where he's being asked to do a little bit of everything throughout the year. And so that's hurt his efficiency this season. But generally, I think it's also finding his own identity on the offensive end. He's taking a lot of mid-range shots this season, not driving to the basket as much, not using his aggression to finish in and around the basket. I think that's something he struggled with. That's why when I watch Mobley, it's like the first thing that pops to me. It's like, oh man, he is so much more aggressive than he was for the first 3 years of his career. That's sort of the next step I want Scottie to take. It's working on his ball handling so he can create separation, and 2, being able to like maneuver through these tight corners and be aggressive to get downhill, because like you said, like he's such a great physical guy. By being able to do that, like, he'll really be able to improve himself offensively. And I do think that'll look better next to better talent, down the road. So yeah, Scottie
and
4.
Mobley has, the experience and confidence playing with that group as that team has gotten better and better with playoff challenges. That continuity and chemistry, where that probably has to do with it too, where he has the team investment behind him, and he has the talent and shooting and spacing to actually be confident that I can go get mine, and I know these guys are going to hit their shots around me. And that just kind of, that confidence just feeds into that aggressiveness that we're looking for. Whereas if the paint's going to be clogged, maybe you're going to be hesitant to try to force through contact and draw fouls all night. And especially, if your record isn't in playoff contention, maybe you're a little less willing to sacrifice the body sometimes and just settle for a jump shot that might be a little tougher. So, I'm not selling stock on any of these guys. We gotta hold on, but maybe once the 10-year mark comes around, we'll do another redraft and see where Scottie's at by then, if where we're at. So I think those top 4 are like, there might be slight gaps here and there, but they are slightly ahead of the pack for me. But I'm up with the 5th pick, so I will say Alperen Sengun is who I got here at number 5.
Cool.
I think he's been a nice handoff hub in Houston. He has nice footwork down low especially on the offensive end, where no one is Jokic, but he is an offensive hub that a team can kind of rely on to help create good looks.
Mhm.
And I know he started the season a little tough as a little worse than normal as a finisher around the rim. I'm not sure how much he's kind of bounced back since then, but like to me, he is the fulcrum of their offense, being able to run handoffs through him and create good looks for their shooters around him.
Yep.
And when he's really going down low and really showing his own at full force, like he can be a post-up scorer that can create DHOs on the elbow and post-ups down low. So I'm going to go with Sengun. I think of all the options left, he is probably the the best choice for a potential reliable offensive engine that I would try to like build an offense around. That I'd probably prioritize that creation ability for the team just slightly above the rest of the talents available at this point.
Yeah, no, that's fair. That is entirely fair. Yeah, I think at what is it, 6 now? I think at 6, this is a guy who I feel like eventually could be 5th, and can climb up in this category. I'm going to say Trey Murphy. Trey Murphy the third as my 5th guy. He's been awesome this season. The Pelicans have obviously had a lost year, so they put the ball in his hands more often. He's creating his own shot more frequently. He's one of the best shooters in the NBA. Just like launches those shots from deep as well. Really talented scorer. Pretty underrated athlete. I'm a big fan of his. I think injuries have limited his like growth potential every year. But if he can keep healthy, if the Pelicans can kind of prioritize him more offensively, I think this is a guy who can eventually be an all-star. So Trey Murphy.
Yeah, and they kind of chose a direction here by moving on from Ingram to Toronto. So now that was always a big question mark, was who are we going to start? How are we going to get all of these forwards or front court players at least on the court at the same time? And they decided they got Zion, they got Trey Murphy, you got Herb Jones still lurking, who we'll probably get to here soon. But this is a great choice, very very talented player. And with the 7th pick, I'm gonna let my magic bias show, I guess. There's a couple Jalen's here where you could go, but I gotta go Jalen Suggs.
There's actually 3 Jalen's here. You could go Jalen.
That's what I mean. Like I would say my next 3 of my next 5 are Jalen's. So shout out Jalen Rose, who takes credit for the name Jalen really really spreading after his arrival. Which if you look at the numbers, I think Pablo Torre did a thing on all of that
on the Jalen's,
like it really showed how popular the name Jalen got after the Bad Boy Pistons, or not Bad Boy Pistons, the Michigan, the starting
Fab
Five Michigan team, so just hilarious. But anyway, Jalen Suggs, to me, he's an all defensive guard. He's one of the best point attack guard defenders in the league. I think he would have been right up in that discussion again this year if not for the injuries. His 3-point shooting, he's shown development every year, and he might not quite live up to that top 5 pick hype that followed him, but he's still Jalen Suggs. Like, he's a big shot maker. He had obviously the huge shot for Gonzaga against UCLA in the semifinal a while back that kind of follows him around, but like he's just a guy that he's just a dog out there. Like, he brings the entire energy for Orlando's defense. It is night and day watching the energy levels when he's not on the court and when he's not available. Like, he almost brings like the energy even while injured, just hyping up his teammates on the sideline in like just street clothes, and you can still feel his energy even from there. So I would say Suggs, mostly because he's an all defensive level guard who has shown offensive development every single year, like as a finisher as the first year, as a decision maker a little bit as the years go on, and most recently as a 3-point shooter. He was a knockdown 3-point shooter last year. I want to say 39%. It's tailed off a little bit this year, but especially do not look at his pull up and catch and shoot splits. It's not that pretty, but his catch and shoot has been solid and reliable, and we'll see where his ultimate role is. Orlando's really tried to give him an opportunity as a point guard this year, especially as Fultz left the roster, and they didn't. They brought in KCP, more of an off-ball 2 guard, D&3 type of guy to slot into the lineup. So this year was about seeing what Suggs could be as a point guard. ultimately, I think he's more of an off-ball connector who can hit the open three and really be a lockdown defender. That's where I would say he ultimately ends up. But I think it's realistic to think this guy still has star potential, that where he can be a great really an elite defender who can hit the open shot and make smart plays for his team on both ends of the floor.
Yeah.
And some of those pre-draft comps, the one that has stuck with me is the Chauncey Billups comp, where he can lock down opposing teams' guards, be a plus defender, and just a really smart player on both ends of the floor, and obviously can hit the big shot.
Yeah,
there it is.
Yeah, exactly.
Hits the big shot. So, big shot Suggs coming at you with the 7th pick there. So with the 8th pick,
I like
you looking at?
Dude, by the way, I love Suggs. He was like, him and Mobley were probably two of my favorite players in that draft cycle. So I couldn't agree more with this decision. You could make an argument he's over Trey, to be honest with you. Okay. Continuing on with Jalen's. We have the number
draft.
Yeah, the Jalen draft. I'm going to go with Jalen Johnson out of the Atlanta Hawks. Yeah, taking him over the other Jalen.
Yeah. I have the same thing.
Yeah, I think Jalen in general has shown, and again, has an opportunity to be higher in here as well. I think you could make an argument over him over Suggs or him over Trey Murphy. Really put it together this season before his injury. Probably could have had a great all-star case. Really great rebounder, pushes in transition, great ball handler for his size, makes plays, pretty talented defender, a all-in-one utility knife at his position, and pairs really well with Trae Young in Atlanta. And I think he just makes sense so much as their secondary guy building next to him if they choose to continue building around Trae Young. So yeah, I think it's Jalen. I think it's a pretty clear-cut case for him to be the number 8 guy here. Again, with some potential to even eventually get higher if we do this later on.
Yeah, and Jalen, Suggs and Johnson are two guys that signed extensions that were viewed as very team friendly over the summer, where they neither one got the max, and so both of them are lurking as potential all defensive guys or all star guys in Jalen Johnson's case, where there's a leap in there that you could see him pop out. And I think Jalen Johnson's one of the most versatile players in the league, and I would have viewed him more on the defensive side of that, but now it's the offense that has just popped, where he's just one of the more versatile forwards that can do a little bit of everything on and off the ball, and could really see his usage probably go up in a different context if it wasn't kind of a Trey dominant offense. But he's just a talent that deserves recognition here. And yeah, I totally agree. He would be right up there in this discussion, and still very well could be an all-star level player, whether it's in Atlanta or not going forward. I think that's on the table. So shout out to him. And the idea that we're 8 picks in and still talking about potential all-stars, I mean, this draft is just insanely loaded. Yeah. I mean, the all defense. And speaking of all defense, with the next pick, I'm going Herb Jones.
Nice.
Where you go another high impact defender, one of the best defenders in the league already. And in the same draft, man, you can make, this is one of the best defensive drafts of all time too. When you really look up and down the list, you got Evan Mobley, Franz Wagner, Scottie Barnes, Jalen Suggs, Herb Jones, and we haven't even mentioned some of the other guys, but just, I mean, Jose Alvarado's down there, Davion Mitchell's down there, some Ayo Dosunmu, just Deuce McBride. I mean, just defenders for days in this draft. So really one of the just stand out. It's hard to find a draft with more positive or elite defenders in it. So if you really go back and look, but yeah, Herb Jones, lockdown defender. I really think that defense is elite level defense that translates to any team. And I think betting on elite skills at this point in the draft is probably where I stand out, where, if in draft context, I would target potential superstars at the top, potential all-stars and all defensive members kind of in that next realm. And then just good basketball players at the good two-way basketball players at the next stop and next tier down. And I think Herb Jones' defense is elite and capable enough to just contribute to a winning team. So he's the next pick here.
Yeah, it's a solid pick, man. I think it's fair to put Herb here. I think after this, it starts to get interesting in terms of guys who could eventually become all-stars, could eventually become all NBA players, but just haven't put it together yet in any sort of reasonable way. But still, like, show flashes immensely.
Yeah.
What is this, 10 now, right? Or would this be 11 that I'm picking?
I should probably number them, but this is the 11th pick for you. And just to add one more point for Herb, he's also hitting 36% on 3 threes a game for his career, 37% if you round up a little bit, with a 4-to-1 assist to turnover ratio. So it's not like he at least provides an offensive role where he can hit the open three and keep the ball moving as a part of his team. So it's not like he's just a one-way player out there where he's hurting the team on the other side. So really, really like his defense. And with the 11th pick, you're up.
Yeah.
I think. I haven't counted wrong.
No, you're right. You're right. It is the 11th pick. I'm kind of like, I'm split on deciding between these two guys, and I wonder if you'll end up be deciding between these two as well. I'm going to take Jalen Green here, which is pretty crazy considering, like, you know.
Now I think it's the 10th pick. Sorry to interrupt. But
it's 10th? Okay.
I think we are at 10.
Okay, all good.
I'll start keeping track now.
All right. 10th pick here, Jalen Green. Look, he was the second overall pick in this draft. And so being redrafted at 10 kind of shows you the story of what his career has been, has not lived up to the potential, but is a scorer, like a guy who can get to a bucket, not as efficient as you'd like to, but can get to buckets, can explode in certain games, has had stretches and months where he's put it all together. I think has moments where he can be a positive defensive player, although he still needs to fill out size-wise, and in order to be as impactful as he can at the point of attack. Not blossoming as a playmaker right now, but I think he has become a little bit more comfortable in pick and rolls and making decisions out of pick and rolls. Again, this is all sort of potential speak here, but I think Jalen has taken a few steps to become a little bit more well-rounded as a scorer, and it's just about figuring out a way to put that all together, man. And so now I'm kind of banking on the potential of him at the 10th overall pick to eventually get to that level. Will he? I don't know. Remains to be seen.
Yeah, I guess I messed up 3 Jalen's in a row there. We could have had a nice Jalen streak in the top 10.
I know.
But hey, no, that's a good choice. I mean, he's a high volume scorer. He's a tough shot maker. He reminds me of kind of the Zach LaVine archetype, where you're just not sure if all the other parts of the winning impact are totally there. But if you're just looking at offensive scoring, like, there are a few that can put the ball in the basket as well as Jalen Green, and as many different ways as a versatile scorer and shooter. And this is part of where the draft gets a little more murky, and you could go a few different ways. I'm actually not going to take Cam Thomas, but that's another guy at this slot with Jalen Green, where I view them similarly in that realm of, like, these could be top scoring options or top 3 scoring options, at least on good teams, if the efficiency really pans out. But who I am going to go with, and who I actually had ahead of Jalen Green as well, is Austin Reeves here with the 11th pick.
Undrafted guy. Let's go. I like it.
He's jumping on the scene. You know, Reeves is just a smart basketball player out there, really high feel for the game.
Damn, I should have looked at the undrafted list. I would have probably picked Austin Reeves. Yeah, it's all good. It's all good. You win some, you lose some. It's all good.
It's all good. We got him in there, and honestly, that's a good call. Maybe I think he should count. Like,
he should count. He should count. Yes.
There we go. We'll take him. But yeah, he's, you know, obviously now he's 3rd in the pecking order, which should suit him well as kind of just a high field decision maker next to Luka and LeBron, who can hit the open three, score a little bit, be a kind of a reliable offensive engine, and I think holds his own defensively pretty well too. So I think he's one of those just good basketball players. You can throw him on any team who can basically just run a pick and roll, get a good shot, guard his own man well, and hit the open three. Like, just that classic, like, we're looking for smart dribble, pass, and shoot basketball players who can defend a little bit too, and that's what Reeves kind of sums up for me.
Yeah, I like it. I like the Reeves pick a lot. That's a good one. Yeah, I probably would have picked Reeves over Jalen Green, to be honest with you, now that we're here, but it's all good.
I was thinking about that. Like, would Houston take Austin Reeves right now over Jalen Green?
That's interesting. That is
And
interesting. Yeah.
I don't know. I mean,
Yeah, it's the fact that it's a conversation is interesting too,
yeah,
right?
especially when you look at second pick versus undrafted.
Yeah,
four
totally.
years later,
Yeah.
how quickly things change.
Yeah, I love Austin Reeves too. I think like I think the leap that people expected of him last year is what he's doing this year. Even before the Luka trade, he had really grown into his own as a decision maker and scorer. So shout out to him. What a career start for that guy. Okay, so next pick for me. Again, another guy with some potential here that I think, again, can get to an all-star level, but has not been able to reach it fully actualized. Also still waiting on a contract extension, has not extended here. That's Jonathan Kuminga.
Oh,
Yeah, I'm going to take Kuminga
okay.
here. Yeah, so like I think Kuminga took some steps before he got hurt here last season or this season for the Warriors. He was getting to the free throw line more. He was aggressive. The Warriors were putting him in more ball screen actions and using him as a rim runner more often to utilize his athleticism. I really do believe in his defensive potential, but he always falls asleep on the defensive end, and it's sort of like banking on him to eventually become the defender that I can see him physically becoming. That's sort of the buy here with Kuminga, but like a guy who he kind of reminds me of is like a modern day version of Amari Stoudemire, but he needs to be better defensively. That is 100% what he needs to become. It's just like refining his role and getting to the point where he could be more heightened on the defensive end, be more impactful on that end. But offensively, I think he's starting to put things together and be more efficient of a scorer, finding his way next to obviously Steph and Draymond and all those guys. So I'm excited to see him come back here because I think with Jimmy Butler, his life will be a little bit easier too. But yeah, I think Jonathan Kuminga is the guy I'm going with here because I do think he could is the word here, eventually become an all-star. So yeah.
Hey, that's high praise. I'd say the athleticism still stands out. Like in a world where there's like 250 pro NBA basketball players, he still stands out as an athlete. Where you still see him play and throw down a dunk or explode and be like, wow, that's a next level athlete. So that is his edge still, and I think he'll be able to find a role and carve a role for a long time because of that big body, a big wing. And like you said, I was relatively lower on him pretty much throughout this entire draft process and the Warriors kind of team building process at the time with the 2 timeline stuff. But I can concede that he has improved. He has become a much smarter basketball player out there, and really finding his role, especially like when to attack, when to cut, when to kind of like just play off of Steph and now Draymond and Jimmy, of course. So, good choice there. He'll have times where like he's just drifting, it seems, and then all of a sudden he'll pop for like 8 points off a three and a cut and a slam and yeah, if he could really just carve out that defensive impact because he clearly has some of the tools, you're looking at a good two-way player there. So there is some potential there, especially in a redraft where it comes down to what the team's looking for. Are you looking for potential who could be the best player 5 years from now? Or if you don't think it's as realistic, do you just take, a good basketball player who's going to help right now for the next 5 years, 10 years or something like that and bring two-way impact? So it's a good back and forth. I don't know if I had him in my lottery, to be honest, but not to be too hot of a take there. I might have had some other guys, but like I said, I am relatively lower on him in general. But not trying to be down.
I'm unfortunately one of those people that's higher. I think like I'm kind of still
the athleticism is rare.
Yeah, I'm enamored by the potential more than anything, and so it's just like, can he put it together? I'm still taking that.
It's understandable. Like there is not another athlete left in this draft anywhere close to Kuminga's level of athleticism. Like is a differentiating factor for him that, is everyone, a lot of players need something that makes them slightly elite at something or just different than the average player to really stand out and build a career out of that and carve out an edge. And that athletic advantage, the burst to beat somebody off a backdoor cut or first step or whatever it may be, is that for Kuminga. So, good pick there. He's right in that range anyway. And, I was considering his teammate. I've always been high on Moses Moody in this range as well. So I'm tempted, but I think I'm just gonna go with Cam Thomas. Like he's just a walking bucket out here. Like I like his efficiency is, I think is up there. Like he's just a high volume scorer that can, get his own, can shoot lights out, can make tough shots. Like whether it's a 6-man or a starting 2 guard really depends on the team context around him. I joke about like, a lot of scorers kind of have to be either 15 points a game, 18 points a game to just make the bench. And then they might have to be 20 or 25 points a game efficiently to make the starting unit if those scorers are not going to bring anything else. Like if they're just not going to bring defense, they're not going to move the ball much, but they are excellent at putting the ball through the net. They kind of have to hit some of these benchmarks, and he's done that. Like when you look at some of his scoring numbers, they really pop off the page. I think a lot of teams could use that scoring outlet, but there is also a case that maybe someone who brings a little more two-way impact could be a better rotation player. So you can't go wrong here. I think there's a few other choices, but you have the last pick of this lottery redraft.
I do,
and there's a lot of fun names here. I'll name them after here. Who do you got at?
There is a lot of fun names. There's a couple of ways you can go, and it really is a testament to like the draft, because this is a stacked draft that has a lot of role players that can be impactful and whatnot. I actually think I'm going to go with Aaron Wiggins.
Okay. Yeah. There it is. Great choice.
Yeah, I think Aaron Wiggins is a guy who has shown more potential this season. Obviously has shot the lights out this year for OKC, but also very, very useful defender for them. Has become a mainstay rotation player for them this season as well. Generally very, very smart basketball player too in terms of making decisions, especially on defense, making great reads. So I'm going to put Wiggins in here just because I think at his worst, he's going to be a very, very high impact player on a very, very good playoff team. And at his best, can he eventually become a starter for a really good team? Maybe. Yeah. I think I'll take that any day of the week. So Aaron Wiggins, that's what I'm going with.
Great choice. Like you said, like a scalable talent where he's contributing in a small role to a winning team right now, and he's very young while doing it.
Yeah.
And
you kind of forget that he was in this draft. I honestly forgot that he was in this draft class, right? So 55th overall pick, that's
right. Yeah. I mean, there's a nod to Presti doing it again, how we listed off, I don't know, 6 potential all defensive team candidates, and then he's got an entire bench unit of young potential down the road, plus defenders who can just dribble, pass, and shoot and do the basics that you want out of a good basketball player. And Aaron Wiggins is one of those guys. And, I shout out Moses Moody. He probably would have been in my lottery as well. I'm still not totally out on him. I don't know why he doesn't play more, to be honest, but he's a
starting to
be a two-way guy. Yeah. Getting more minutes now, and with the trade, you would think really could unlock him, but he would be my next pick. But you can't go wrong. Deuce McBride's a guy that I really love for the Knicks. Loved him back then too. Just another point of attack dog defender. You got Corey Kispert, lights out 3-point shooter over on the Wizards. He's lighting them up. Launch. I don't know how many, but launching a lot of 3-point volume per game. And just to name a couple of the guys here: Quentin Grimes, Jose Alvarado, Ayo Dosunmu, Santi Aldama, Josh Giddey, Trey Mann, Sam Hauser, Delano Banton, Davion Mitchell, Day'Ron Sharpe, Isaiah Jackson, Justin Champagne, Jay Huff. That would round out a potential top 30 in a redraft. And almost all those guys are rotation players, at least on teams here in the NBA. So that's one of the deepest, most talented drafts I've ever seen, and we might ever see. So, it's, and shout out to the defense one last time. This is a defensive pod today where we got the Defensive Player of the Year award. We got one of the best defensive draft classes of all time, really diving into it. So a lot of fun just diving into all this defense here. Thanks for taking the time today, Ez.
Yes, sir. Appreciate you, man. RK, as always, man. Thank you.
You know it. Appreciate it. Learning Basketball is a Swiss Theory podcast hosted from Beyond the Arcade. Hey, that's me. You can find my work on Twitter, YouTube, Substack, and check out the team's writing at theswishtheory.com.